do you still write in your native languages? Because having lived here most of your life, people just think in English, but is there a desire to sort of reconnect with your past by writing in your native language as well? And I'm just very curious about that subject.
I don't write in Serbo-Croatian at all. I wish I could. I think that it would be interesting to do so because it's an extremely rich language, and there's particular words or phrases that are so specific that just don't show up in English, and I think that that's something that might be sort of particular to Slavic languages, or I don't even know what I'm talking about really. But no, the short answer is no, I don't, but I wish I could.
Yes, I write in Russian. I just use English alphabet.
Very good. And do you write in Vietnamese?
Oh, like Téa, I wish I did. I mean, I speak Vietnamese, but I don't write or read it very well. And one of these days, I hope to do it. Every time I go to Vietnam, older people will come up to me and they'll say "Nhớ quê hương," which is remember your country. And when they say that, I feel like, ashamed. I feel like I should probably learn this language better and write in it one day. So I'd like to.
And your language is English, right? So
yeah, but I tried to write in Braille once. I got hold of a Braille typewriter, and I finally, after learning how to put the paper in, I just started typing away, and then I sent the letters out to people, and someone who I sent a letter to actually talked her way into the Xavier Institute for the Blind on 23rd Street to have it deciphered, but of course I was just typing. And so the woman who read the Braille for her said, "This guy's an idiot." She said, "This guy can't write anything."
Has any of you gone back yet to the country you are originally from, though, and read? And did you get any interesting and provocative questions from people about your choosing to write in English?
I was nodding before I heard the second part of the question. I've been back, but I haven't read there. Although people frequently ask me, why I choose to write in English, and that's about as provocative as the question gets. And the answer is I have no choice. So. And
what about you with your declamatory skill? Have you read in Russia your poems, and in English and in Russian, or?
I think by now in 2011 Russian people understand that there is a big diaspora, and some of the more literary people actually encourage it because they want to see what happens to the language. Russian poets who have translated me, they're actually interested in that because they're interested what happens to the sensibility of language when other influences are brought in. So
from English back into Russian?
From English back into Russian, sure.
And you haven't translated your own poems into Russian just for fun?
Why bother?
Good answer. Any questions from anyone else? Yes?
Yeah, I'm excited, and thank you all very much, but I'm excited about this opportunity because all art, whether it's literature or painting or music, embodies the belief system, the ideology, the behavior of a culture. And you've all kind of transcended, you're between two cultures. And as you look at yourself, could you speak to that, or is that does that make sense, that question?
Is your question whether they are still retaining their root culture, or whether they're transforming this?
They're artists, they're all artists. Mm-hmm. And so the artist embodies the belief system, the ideology of your culture, because America is different. Okay,
do you feel that in your writing in English you are carrying forth something from the past that's part of your history?
Poets are not born in a country, they are born in childhood.
Pardon me, I didn't understand.
I say poets are not born in a country, they are born in childhood. So of course, America is an empire, it's Rome. There are many poets who come from other countries to Rome, like they used to come to Rome before,
I mean, I would say that it's, I have my cultural ties and my affiliations with Ethiopia. I'm completely American at the same time, but for me it's less about trying to, I think it's not about trying to mimic or recreate a cultural value so much as the fact that I think as writers we are all deeply concerned with what's essential about being human. It's not, and those aren't tied to nations, to countries, to language even. I think it's entirely about this fact that we all kind of live, die, breathe, love on fairly similar terms, and our intention as writers is to try to express that, and we express it through characters who are from different cultures, different countries, sometimes different languages, but we're all sort of striving, I think, for the same aim, and that cultural differences actually in that regard don't exist. They are what it means to be human.
But so are you saying that you guys, and I want if any of you cares to respond to this, please leap in. Are you saying that you don't consider your writing so much American as global or personal? Is this American writing or is it something else? What would anyone like to say?
I mean, isn't that American writing? It's not that the sense that American writing has to be somehow confined to just existing within the boundaries of America, I think is not true. I think American writing is because we write in English, because we are here, because we take our histories, our cultures, and we bring them and translate them into American experiences. It's not so much about it being global, but that American culture is expansive enough to be everything. It's not limited to that.
So you're being yourselves, but here by accident?
Well, I'll throw out a Faulkner quote. He said that the artist's only responsibility is to his art. And I guess the reason I would kind of refer to that is, I feel like if you feel like when you're writing something and you bear the responsibility of representing the culture, I think your work kind of suffers. I think I became a better writer when I was less self-conscious about giving voice to whatever it was that I thought. My only responsibility is to make this a really good story, and to be, and to keep the integrity of the language. And to be truthful in whichever way that I choose to be, and I was a better writer once I had that frame of mind. I guess that's about the best way I can explain it.
I think writers' only responsibility is to the language they write in, to the joy of that language, to making that language more rich, more interesting, more alive.
I had a question for Simon because, of course, you come from England and Wales, and so you're here in this country more electively, more by choice. Does your writing, is it different because you've spent most of your adulthood in America, or do you feel that geography, how does that geography shape your writing, if it does at all, being in America, not in England?
I feel like I was born in exile. I mean, what I mean is, I've never really felt at home anywhere. Except Brooklyn, which sounds strange, but in Wales, I suppose I wasn't considered Welsh, and in England I was considered Welsh, and but in America I'm considered a New Yorker, especially when I drive, across the country. I didn't mean that. But of course, driving in New York, things come out of your mouth that you never imagined you would say. So I feel like I'm a mockingbird culturally. I borrow from cultures to enable my characters.
Any more questions from the audience, please? Let me get you. Okay, go ahead. Then we'll get the man in the back with his hand up next. Go ahead.
Hello, it's so nice to be here this evening. I just wanted to ask you, Ilya, I have had books of poetry by poets whose native language was not English. And so they would publish a book of poetry with the poem in their native language and then the English translation on the other side of the page. And I much enjoyed those, and I wondered if you ever did that, would you do your own translations? If you wrote your poem in English, would you then translate it into Russian and have it on the facing page? Because it really makes a lovely book of poetry done that way.
Thank you. I'm a very slow writer. I write about a book every 10 years, so I wouldn't have time for that. I'm just being selfish, I guess.
What about facing with the translations that the Russians have done of your English poems?
I translate other poets, sure. That's a service to poets I love, I like translating other poets. I don't think I need to translate myself. If it's good enough, then somebody else will do it.
I'm satisfied with that answer. I'm satisfied. And I want to say, if I ever hear a Russian read poetry, I want him to sound just like you.
Thank you. And you in the back?
There was an anthology published a few years ago called Becoming Americans, which ranged across about 300 years of different Americans who are immigrant Americans sharing their experiences. There seemed to be a trend in those writings that if in fact you came to America as an adult, they were more inclined to reclaim the previous heritage, whereas if they came as children, then what they were writing about was more grappling with what it meant to grow up an American and as someone who was foreign born. And so I'm wondering whether in fact that accords with your own experience, and when you look for people, when the writers that influenced you, were they more likely to be American born or foreign born?
Okay, that's kind of two different questions. So the first question is, like, two of you came here pretty young, Vu and Dinaw, and you came here you two came here a little older, like you were 10 or so you're in your teens, and you're kind of a special case. But so do you mark a distinction, and do you agree with his distinction that people who came here younger write more about their assimilated American experience, whereas people who came here older write more about their source country? Does anyone want to speak to that?
I mean, I think it depends largely on, I mean, for me personally, the first novel I wrote was very much about the experiences of somebody older than I was, because there had never been sort of characters from Africa, Ethiopia in American literature, and I think I was sort of deeply aware of the fact that I wanted to create a space for those characters. Not that that was the mission or the agenda behind writing it, but I was concerned about telling this history that I had not personally experienced because it hadn't been written before, and that sort of diaspora experience hadn't been told before because the generation that left Ethiopia, the generation that was like fleeing the revolution, couldn't write that narrative. They didn't have the access to language, the sort of freedom and luxury that comes with saying you're going to write these stories. And so I began with that, with writing a history that I hadn't lived personally. And I think from there you sort of grow and you change. But for me, the process began with that, with trying to reclaim a history that actually wasn't personally mine, but yet at the same time was entirely mine.
It's true. His books actually cover both bases, opposite bases, and I think it's sort of actually hard reading what they've read, hearing what they've read, to make them conform to that model either. Did one of you want to talk to this, or should we get to the second part?
I was just going to say that it depends also where you grow up in the United States. If you grow up like me in Oklahoma, I was the only like Vietnamese person I knew, and if you grow up young that way and then you start writing about your culture, your country, you feel a little bit like a foreigner. You feel like a fake. I felt like a fake for a long time because I felt so distant and disconnected. But my parents kept me connected. And at this point, you know, when I talk about like Vietnam, I refer to it as home. But then when I go to Vietnam, I refer to America as home. And I'm perfectly fine, you know, being, you know, not deciding. I think it's a perfectly comfortable spot for me. It's kind of like if you ask me, do you believe in God? And don't tell my mom this, but I don't know, and I'm perfectly fine not knowing. It's the same kind of thing. It's harder for other people, and that's perfectly fair and fine. But for me, I feel very comfortable being calling several places home. You know.
I don't know what is American culture, but I can tell you that American literature is really quite strong, beginning with Faulkner and ending with Dora Welty and Zora Hurston and so forth. American literature is really, really quite good. America is wrong. I'm sorry to say it again, but there's no way to get out of that. We are a country bombing other countries and telling other countries what to do, and that's very much a part of our culture. And the writer's responsibility is to say it out loud.
The writer's responsibility is to say it out loud.
In New York, it's almost like a home base for us because we can then travel off into space, i.e., you know, Kentucky or Texas or. And the German film director Wim Wenders, when he was making Paris, Texas, he said he was inspired by Homer's Odyssey, and that the only place he could make that something inspired by Homer's Odyssey was Texas, was in the United States. American culture to me is sort of the combination of desires all brought together, and I feel personally that it's a place where I can be myself if I have the courage that day to do that.
Thank you. And
I would also that I think we are American culture. This sense that I think you were sort of making almost a discrepancy between the sort of immigrant experience and the American experience, as if these two were somehow in conflict and tension. And for me, it's not the case at all. It's that we are that American culture is all of us. It's not limited to coming from a foreign culture and being in America. And America is very particular and unique in that way, where you can actually become American. And I say that like living in Europe and watching that process of realizing how you actually can become a part of an identity, and that's very special and unique to America. And I feel sort of more and more appreciative of that fact that this is a landscape that allows a sort of ever broadening experience of what it is to be American and what it is to be, what defines American culture. There's nothing sort of stolid or staid about it. It will sort of reinvent itself constantly, and I think that's part of why we're here actually, that's why we have this panel of like young immigrant artists. It's because we are evolving that sensibility of the depth of American culture. It's not limited by any culture, age, race, whatever it is may be.
you find it more flexible and more permeable than in France?
Anywhere. I mean, just anywhere, really. Like France, anywhere else in the world, without a doubt.
Most of you were quite young when you came to America, but I'm wondering what your perception or your fantasy was about the trip you were about to make to America. How did you view America before coming here?
One of the reasons that we ended up moving here following the war, and I mean, I grew up in Cairo and in Cyprus, and there came a moment where it was either go back or come here. And there was very heavy weight on American education, and I was, brought here with the understanding that here, and I think that speaks to that, what you just said about it being very different here than anywhere else, is that you could be really anything that you wanted to be if you applied yourself the correct way, and that possibility, while it exists in other places, doesn't exist anywhere on the level that it does here. It can, I think, really be done. And that was the assumption that I sort of, that was the great golden dream that I was brought here with. And yeah, it was a good way to think about it.
Thanks. And Ilya, I know that your mother made you get a law degree because she wasn't sure poetry would pay. So maybe could you just talk about the opportunities your family hoped to get by coming here?
It's a complex question. It's easy to say wonderful things, and it's easy to criticize as well. When I was a child in Russia, we were watching a lot of propaganda on TV, and the most visual thing that I remember is how much Soviet propaganda told us all the time that there were homeless people in America, and how many jokes we made, because nobody believed that, because there were no homeless people in Soviet Union at all. And coming to US was a huge shock. I came to San Francisco, if any of you know the Tenderloin district, it's a city of homeless people. So that changed my view a lot. Having said that, of course, it's a very open society. The city of New York is a very open society, not elsewhere necessarily. But the city of New York is a great country in of itself, which gives you a lot of freedoms and a lot of intellectual life. But I do think that we must say both of those things. We must say both of those things, not just once. We shouldn't say it's all a dream, because it's not. And it's obviously not all a nightmare, because here we are having a wonderful time.
I'm wondering if you guys always thought of yourself as writers, or was there like an aha moment, or was it just like, did it come after like a lot of slogging and suffering that you
I guess I've never not known. I actually can pinpoint it was first grade reading group. And, you know, the assignment was to write a story, and I wrote one, and I read out loud, and I said, boom, that's what I want to do. And that's really all outside of like teaching. It's all I can really do. Only other thing I ever wanted to do was be a shortstop for the Chicago Cubs, but that's not happening anytime soon. So
that actually makes me think of, you guys are role models perhaps for other people from your countries. Do you get young people coming to you, kids, asking you for advice? Does that happen a lot? Do you feel that you're treated as role models to your communities, you know, in this, that you meet when you're out talking or teaching or talking to classes?
I would say no immigrant parent wants their children to become a writer. I mean, no one's like, go, you see that guy, you should do that. It's just never going to happen. And it's like, you see that guy, you're not going to have any money. You can totally do the same thing he does. And so, but there is this also, I think, nice part of I mean, I can only talk personally, is that I come from a culture that does not have a sort of great literary history in itself. But yet, at the same time, there's this sort of pragmaticism that happens with immigration, where you want your children to sort of do the logical things of being a lawyer, being a doctor, and at the same time there's this sort of gratitude that happens, I think, with immigrant cultures in America, where they see their lives in narrative form, in fiction, and they feel that it's suddenly alive, and that it's suddenly valid in a way that I think people respond to that, not so much the fact that no one would ever tell their children to do the same thing. It's like, go into debt, make no money, or make less money than you would do if you did pretty much anything else. But at the same time, knowing that you can create a culture and bring it into the sort of American landscape, I think people respond to that.
Yeah, Wales is a country that reveres writers and singers, and so I'm thinking we should take a trip there together. And my mother grew up in Ireland, so of course when I said that I'd like to be a writer, it was well received. Otherwise, my mother wanted me to be a priest, and I think I wouldn't have minded being that.
Thank you, writers. Keep writing. And everyone, will have a table for them to sign books if you'd like to get their books and read more. Thanks.